Hello everybody, I am Jeffrey Hauser, author of the Learn With series. A colleague of mine recently asked how he could do two-way binding in Angular for a dynamically generated component in TypeScript. And Angular does not provide an easy way, but with some work you can get it working. I did some rabbit holing and experimentation around this concept because of the question, and I'm turning it into this podcast series, this screencast series about two-way binding. In this episode, we're going to worry about binding values from the parent down into the child. Now, I have a few different ways to do it. This one, we'll take a look at using differs to make that happen. If you don't know, differs are some libraries provided as part of the Angular framework that allow us to keep track of changes. There are two types of differs: key value differs, which is what we're going to use here, and an iterator differ, I believe, which is used to keep track of array changes. Okay, I'm starting from the same code we had in the previous sample, and I'm in the app component. I'm going to start by injecting a differ. So this is the key value differs, are basically an object differ, and it'll take a look at keys and their values and let us know when things change. I'm going to jump down to the ng. Actually, I'm going to create. So the way differs work, it's not automatic. I wish it were automatic through like an observable or something, but it's not. We actually have to manually perform a diff operation, and we're going to do that later in do check. So let's implement that in here. Yes, so that's there. But to do that, we're going to have to actually save our instances of the component ref and the differ. So comp ref any and comp differ any. Oh, we'll create those there. Actually, I'm gonna leave it at that. So then here we're going to do this dot comp ref equals intoms, like that. Oops. So actually, and let's rename this compref instance so there's no confusion. And then we want to create our differ. So this comp differ equals this dot differs dot find this dot create. And this creates a differ, and it's creating a differ for this, so it's looking at all the values in this particular component and how to and keep track of them. So let's move to the do check. Now, I try to avoid putting things in do check as much as possible because this method runs a lot. It's very hard to debug. This is basically the redraw method for everything you see on the screen. But this kind of makes most sense to check the differ here. So first we want to make sure it exists. So if it exists, then we're going to get the changes. Differ dot diff this. So that'll get our changes. If there are any, of course, I believe it returns null or undefined if not. So if there are changes, and if result.key equals value, then this dot compref instance dot value equals this dot value. Oh, I did something wrong. If changes changes for each changed item result. Yeah, so this is what's going on here. So this is not intended to be a session to tell you how differs work. So we're not going to inject into this result item to see what it is or what is in this changes. We're just using them to automatically do a two-way binding. So we have binding from the inside out using this value changes observable that's inside our component value change observable. And we're going to use differs tied into the Angular component lifecycle, so the ndDoCheck method in this case. Going to use differs to keep track of changes, and if the internal name changed, or rather if the value one changes within this component, the next time the do check is run, the screen is being redrawn, it'll pass that value down to the child. So let's see, looks like it built. So we change the value there. It's pretty quick. And it didn't work. Bonus points if you actually figured out what I did wrong. This result.key should be value 1 because that is the value in this component, in our app component, that's being changed. Or yes, that's being changed. And changes, then we pass that value down in and rebuild. So internal, that works correct. External, write down. So that's how differs work as one approach to mimic the functionality of two-way binding. I'm not a fan of this approach because of the complexity. It requires another Angular provider that you have to inject into your component, which isn't that bad. But you also have to add instant variables for both the differ and for the ref instance. For the component instance and the differ. So we're cluttering up our component with new values, and we have to tie into doCheck, which is basically this method is going to get run a lot. So this change is being checked an awful lot. So if we can avoid this, this is actually the first idea I thought of in my first experiments. If we can avoid this, I would definitely do it, but differs are one valid way to mirror this two-way binding functionality that we get in the HTML template just using TypeScript. In the next episode, I'm actually going to take a look at see if we can do this using set methods for that value one component. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, please check out my book series at learnwith.com, which gives you a lot of information about how I use Angular every day to build enterprise applications for clients.